Yo, welcome into another episode. It's Capturing the Game Within the Game podcast featuring me, your host, Desmond Jones, and my man's the one and only Juwan Polo Man Stewart. Today we got another special guest in the building, but she's more than a special guest because she is an absolute legend. She's already showing us the Hall of Fame ring before we even got started today. But let me go ahead and introduce you to her. She is a WBL pro legend, a six-time Hall of Famer, the CEO of Susan Summons Speaks. Of course, her name is Susan Summons. Susan, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing amazing, Desmond. Thank you so much for having me on the show, you and Juwan, and Capturing the Game and Chantel.
Of course. Thank you. It's a lot of things going on with March Madness and stuff and everything. But let's go ahead, get started with you. I know we won't get into basketball here sooner or later. So let's go ahead and get started with you. You can go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm Susan Summons. I'm the CEO of SusanSummonsSpeaks.com. I'm also a retired professor and head women's basketball coach. And I'm one of the original W's, WBL Women's Pro Legend, the WBL before the WNBA. So we all worked together and we had some pioneers, a lot of trailblazers and women top players out there that were pioneers that helped to pave the way, to help create that foundation for what the WNBA is today, 25 years later.
Yeah, thank you for, being one of those founding pieces because I know the W wouldn't be what it is today without, people like you holding up the WBL, prior before the launch of the WNBA. I always look at the WBL as the trial run before the actual launching of the WNBA.
No question about it. It was certainly an experience. And, we also are not only in March Madness, Desma and Juwan, but we're in the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Mm-hmm. And if we are familiar with Title IX and that legislative law that talked about there should be no discrimination against race, culture, women, gender equality for individuals and women to be able to participate in sports. And that legislative piece really changed and transformed the whole agenda of what sports and the opportunities that girls and little girls had an opportunity to participate in sports over years, over decades. And look where we're at today. We have March Madness for women. We have ESPN covering and providing major media coverage. You have the WNBA 25 years later, quite sustaining in an atmosphere and a foundation that's been male dominated in professional sports. You now have a solidified women's professional league. And you have the $22 million woman, Dawn Staley, South Carolina Gamecocks. They're getting ready to rock. You've got a consistent Tara Vanderveer, who's consistently getting Stanford to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and potentially the Final Four. So you have dads that are bringing their daughters to the game, Jawan. You've got NBA dads that are taking their daughters to the women's college games and the WNBA games. So that legislative piece, the history on that legislative piece and the impact it's had on the game has been transformational. So we're in a celebration mode. This also is Women's History Month, all in the same conjunction. And women empowering women all around the world to lead, have their voice heard, be heard, sit at the table, if you will, as my colleague Mike Huda from the Sports Deli would say. So it's relevant. This show, Capturing the Game, that's exactly what you're doing. This is a great show. Chantel, big ups and applaud and a shout out to her. I've been watching your show for a while. A shout out and applaud to you and your counterpart, Jawan. You're doing a great job. You're getting the word out. This is a great platform to let the people around the world and the globe know of the impact and power of sports.
And Desmond, I want you got your cue ready for the applause. We gotta give her flowers because she's a legend. We gotta give the legends some flowers. We gotta give her flowers now. We gotta do it now. Okay. You got your cue ready. You got your cue. You don't have your cue,
I
Desmond.
got it.
Come on, we got to get the
It's
call.
playing.
It's
It's
not
playing.
playing.
It's
Yeah,
playing.
there we go. Okay,
There we
yeah,
go.
okay,
There we
perfect.
go.
Yeah, that's what I need to hear. Okay, we're gonna start a new tradition. We got to give people their flowers while especially legends, like people that are legends. Like this is a legend. We're speaking to a legend right now. Um, and like you said, everything that you said is true. Especially, it's a lot going on. March Madness, it's literally March Madness everywhere. You got, like you said, the 50th anniversary. You got it's a lot. It's a lot going on. So, I mean, we're going to talk about it. We're going to get into all that. Let's unpack it all. Like, how does it feel to be one of the pioneers for like seeing it from when it started and knowing what you had to go through to get to this point? How does that feel to see it now, even though it's not done? We know the road's not finished. Job's not done, as Kobe said, or RIP. But how does it feel?
Well, Jawan, first of all, I'm humbled and I'm honored and grateful, filled with gratitude to even be in this moment and sharing this journey, with people around the world, with you, your show, and just being thankful to be a part of the history of what's happened and what's evolving in the game itself. When I played the game, there were no girls around playing the game. It was just guys. I grew up in Boston. I'm originally from Boston, from Roxbury. We played in the historical Boston Neighborhood Basketball League where they had the big Boston shootout. But some of the top players, if you played in Boston in the Boston shootout, oh, you were getting drafted. That was the place to be. And so I grew up in that neighborhood playing ball 24 hours, 7 days a week. I mean, we would take a snow shovel and shovel the snow off the ground just to get a hoop to work on our shot. Sometimes we would shoot in the snow. And when you're shooting on a chain link net, the chains are heavy, the net is heavy. You're trying to hear that swoosh. You don't always hear it, but you're trying to shake the snow loose and the ice from the chain to work on your rotation. And it actually makes you to have a better rotation because you're working harder against the resistance of the weather. But that's what we did. We'd shovel a court, let's clear some space. We got an and one, and who's next? Oh, that's it. Who's next? Who's lining up? So I grew up with the guys. I played with the guys. I learned the game with the guys. When I was in middle school in the John Winthrop Middle School, I remember there was this young lady there. She was dribbling the ball. And I said, and I was a track athlete, really. And all sports came easy to me, but I love track. And I qualified for the national Jesse Owens track meets. But I had an opportunity to go to a basketball camp that was being presented by Tom Sachs-Sanders from the NBA Boston Celtics and Don Nelson. And I grew up around the Boston Garden, Red Auerbach, JoJo White, John Havlicek, Tommy Heinsohn, Casey Jones, all of those names, Larry Bird. I was sitting in the stands from a little girl watching the game, watching the Los Angeles Lakers, thinking one day, I might be able to play that game. I like that game, but I was focused on track. I said, okay, that's cool. I can do that. So I went over to her. I said, you got to teach me how to dribble this ball. And I learned at that moment, in that time, how to dribble the ball with my right hand, my left hand. I became good. And then I kind of took that piece and added the other components. And then I just added the jumping. And before you know it, the next time I was out on that playground, I was saying, and one, next, got next. And I continued to play with the guys. I always got picked up. And we grew up in a time when they had the AIAW. There wasn't a lot of college scholarship opportunities for girls. Title IX law had just been enacted in 1972. And I grew up and was a Boston Neighborhood Basketball League MVP and nowhere to go with that talent and skill, putting up 25 points, 28 points, 17 rebounds, crossing over. I told someone the other day, I invented the crossover. Because my crossover was sick. It was low, it was explosive. And the lower, we all know the lower the crossover is, the harder it is to defend. Defender has to literally go low and drop. When they go low and drop, they're off balance. You got them. They're gone. Stuck, boop, gone, or they're breaking their ankles. So it was a very competitive time. It was a fun time. Growing up, playing that game every day in Boston. Of course, that was also a way to stay off the streets.
Yeah.
You know, stay off the streets, keep your mind focused, try to stay away from the gangs, try to stay alive, try to stay out of the fights, try to stay away from the drugs. All the dimensions and dynamics that we all know can break down a young person and cause them to be distracted from their dreams and their goals. So I would just play that game. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of scholarships. So I was a 6-time BNBL Neighborhood Basketball League MVP. I just won the high school state championship. I was a high school MVP, still nowhere to go, no scholarship. My mom needed help. I grew up in a family of 7, 6 girls and 1 boy. He was in the Vietnam War and my mom needed help. So I went in the Army.
Oh, wow.
I enlisted in the United States Army. And yeah, you know, I needed a job. I had to help my family. And so I went in the United States Army. And during that time, they developed a program in the neighborhood using one of the old abandoned Catholic church buildings that the state and city had. And they donated it to a program that the Department of Education had approved called Roxbury Community College. And Roxbury Community College didn't have no gym. They didn't have no building. They didn't have their own building. They had a name and they knew it was going to be a community college in Roxbury. So they donated this Catholic church. And while I was in the United States Army in training, I got a call from the program coach letting me know, we're going to get a program at Roxbury Community College. I heard you were in the Army. You know, how long do you have? We need you to come back. We're getting this team together and we know you're a baller. You're a Boston MVP. I was one of the first women's professional basketball players, the first Boston, the first Roxbury, the first New England African-American women's professional basketball player drafted in the 3rd round of the WBL. Now imagine that, a little girl from Roxbury, from no education. I couldn't even pass the SATs. I couldn't even get into college. No matter how many times I took the test, I just couldn't pass it. I've struggled with reading. I struggled with writing. I struggled with math, and I would never talk. I would talk when I was on the basketball court. That's when I would talk. I'd cross you over and I'd drop 35 points on you like it was nothing. And back then they didn't have the 3-point shot. So, you know, if I'm putting up 30 points or 35, you know, I have to be working if there's no 3-point shot at that time. So I went in the Army. I got an honorable early discharge to come back to Boston. I did my basic training, my AIT. I got stationed at the Boston unit. On the weekends, I was an Army warrior. During the weekday, I was a full-time student in college playing basketball as a starter at Roxbury Community College, leading them to a national junior college championship tournament, being an All-American. Graduating, moving on to Lamar University, finishing number 2 in the state of Texas in scoring, leading Lamar University to an AIAW National and Southland Championship and getting drafted. I mean, you asked me how I feel about being a part of that history and the journey. It's been remarkable, but like you said, it's not over. It doesn't stop because there's too many little girls out there that need help, that need to be inspired. There's too many women and colleagues and adults that need to be inspired to know, you know what? Never give up on your dream. Always persevere. Always believe. Believe you have a right to sit at the table. You have a right to lead, the female lead. And it's okay to be aggressive. It's okay to be assertive. It's okay to speak your mind. It's okay. And when I was growing up, I didn't see people that looked like me to say that. So I didn't think it existed. But I grew up believing and feeling, even though I didn't, and someone asked me this on a show, who are your role models? I said, I didn't have any role models. My role models were male counterparts, the NBA players, the NFL players. And I looked at their game and I looked at how they were interacting and networking. And so it was an easy transition for me as a woman to be able to network and interact in a male dominated working culture, because I grew up as a competitor. That's not always easy for women, because women are historically, women are conditioned to believe that they should be in the kitchen, or they should be cooking, or they should be the mother, or they should be the one raising the kids. They shouldn't be the one out training or sweating or getting in shape or playing basketball or playing hockey or dreaming about being an engineer or a pilot or a professional basketball player. So history has dictated that, but it's changed. But I wasn't fortunate to grow up with that. So I grew up believing and saying to myself, though I didn't have role models that I can look up to or inspire me, I wanted to be one of those role models to inspire others and be that role model that little girls would have to look up to, or my colleagues would be able to look up and say, you know what? I see someone like me. And if she can do it, and if she can persevere, and if she can be ambitious, and if she can be on Capture the Game show, and if she never gives up, then I can do it. And that has been part of what has inspired me on this journey over a number of years, and why I continue to keep unfolding and keep blossoming in this game. This game has been good to me. This game has saved my life a number of times. And we all know sports is a universal language. It doesn't matter. Yeah, right, Juwan and Desma, you can be in any country, sitting at anyone's table, and all you got to do is find the rock or the basketball, or say, and one, or next, or hey, let's get a game. You got your sneakers? And everybody, that becomes a conversation right there. And no one cares about who you are, what side of the track you're on, what side of the line you're on. It's just a game. Let's play the game. Let's win the game. Let's get it done. And let's have fun with this camaraderie. So the journey, Jawan and Desmond, has been amazing. And I am just grateful, with gratitude, to be a part of this history. And I'm grateful. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the women. I'm excited for the women's game. I'm excited for all of those WBL pro legends, the trailblazers that paved the way for the WNBA, and they're getting their recognition. They're getting their acknowledgement. The Legends of the Ball, which is an organization. There are a number of television documentaries coming out. Title IX is unfolding a documentary in June. There'll be another documentary unfolding over the next year. There's many unfolding that's gonna be talking about the stories and story of women's professional basketball, the history of the game, the WBL, the WNBA, the pioneers. And I'm just very fortunate to be a part of that process. And I'm simply humbled. So I'm delighted to be on the show with you. And we talk hoops and life and humanity. And, thank you for my roses and my flowers. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we're gonna give you another set of round of applause, because you went through a lot to get to where you are today, and it definitely doesn't go unnoticed. But your story, would definitely inspire other people that look like you, to let them know that you can do it. It is possible. You know, look at what she did. She paved the way. She paved the way so that it could be easier for you to walk through it. And you know, much appreciated for you, and also much appreciated to the others that helped started and founded the WBL. And also thank you for the WNBA players that are, you know, play early in the years, and they could have stopped playing, but they decided to keep playing. So you know, just shout out to everyone that's paved the way.
The only
History.
question I got though is this. That's the only question I got. If you
Only
would, if you did
question.
have a 3-pointer, how much would you average?
Oh, that's a good question. If I had a 3-pointer, if the 3-point shot was in existence at that time when I played the game,
Yeah.
I probably would average probably about 28, maybe 29 points a game. I was a track athlete. I was fast, explosive. I was incredibly explosive and quick, and I had an incredible acceleration. You know, Allen Iverson has a tremendous crossover. Tim Hardaway, a tremendous crossover. And one of the things they did out of their crossover was come out of the crossover and accelerate on the first step, which is deadly. Some players cross over, but they don't have that extra acceleration in the first step. I had both. I had the acceleration and I had an explosive first step. So before you could even catch me, I've already left you and I'm gone, either left or right. I would probably average 28, 29 points. You know, when I was at Lamar University, you know, one of my memorable moments was when we were in an AIAW Southland Championship game. I had a fever. I felt like I was coming down with something. I took some Tylenol and I said, "Oh, coach, I don't feel very good." And I'm thinking, this is the game of the century. I can't let my team down. I can't let the program down. I'm a baller shot caller. And I played that game with the flu. I had the flu. I didn't know I had the flu. Just like Michael Jordan played his game for the Chicago Bulls. Everybody remembers that phenomenal game Michael Jordan had. He was sick. And I think he must have poured in 52, 54 points that game. I scored 43 points in that Lamar University college game, one of the top and historical single college scoring games in the history of the AIAW women's basketball collegiate games. And that record stood for about 10 or 15 years after that until Cheryl Swoops came along for Texas Tech and hit 47. But 43 points, I had the flu, but that was an incredible game. Crossover transition, the jump shot was deadly. And yeah, the 3-point shot, I would have been a natural. I had incredible leaping ability. I could hang on the rim. I was a high jumper.
Right.
Yeah, for Jesse Owens track meets. And I qualified and I had a chance to go out there. And Tom Satch Sanders, who's like one of my mentors, Naismith Hall of Fame for the Boston Celtics. He's like my second dad. He helped to train me before I left for the Women's Pro League and training camp. I called him up. I said, "Satch, I just got drafted." He said, "What?" "I got drafted in the Women's Pro League and I'm flying back to Boston. I need you to train me." And when I got back to Boston, I called him up. We worked out a schedule and he trained me for a couple of weeks, once or twice a week. And then I left to fly out to New Jersey for training camp. But at Lamar, I finished number 2 in the state of Texas in scoring. Number 2 in the state of Texas, behind the number 1 scorer that was also drafted in the WBL, Rosie Walker. And that's history. You know, when you got, in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you're coming from. And there's always a historical chronological perspective. And so when all of that evolved, Lamar, the draft, the WBL, I was working at a Sears Auto Part body shop, pumping gas in college, part-time. Hey, that's the grind. You had to get it done. My mother couldn't afford, my mom couldn't afford to send me money. She would send me, and I was proud. She'd send me half of her food stamps. And I wasn't ashamed about that. And I would help her And I would work that part-time job while I was a full-time student and a starter on that college team. And I never once lost my starting role. I never once had my grades reduced. And I never once did not show up when it was game time. Because I'm from Beantown. And we ball up there. 24 hours, snow, sleet, rain. It's game on. Bring it. And that's the way it was. So that, when you think about that history, Desmond and Jawan, and you think about how it helps to build character and leadership and discipline and being organized and time management, you have to have those life skills to be effective and successful in today's world, in today's economy. As a college student in the NCAA, as a Division I college player, as a business entrepreneur, you have to have those skills. You have to have a level of resiliency, mental toughness. You have to be able to overcome. You have to be able to overcome and persevere and be what we all call and we all know a peak performer.
Amen. You preaching right now.
It's Sunday. It's Sunday, so
it is.
Yeah. So it's relative, in the process when we look at how sports and life skills, higher education, society, the society impact that it has on sports today versus sports 20 and 25 and 30 years ago. And you look at the transition and college athletes, male and female, and some of the perks they have. You now have the transfer portal, Desma and Jawan.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the transfer portal is going to impact sports for women and for men? How do you think it's going to impact?
Man, it's gonna impact a lot. I mean, we are seeing as of right now 3 Kentucky players, on a college women's basketball side is already in the transfer portal already, and their season just ended like a couple of days ago. So they got three of their starters, and they losing Ryan Howard because she's going to the draft. So you got 4 of their starters already going to the transfer portal. So now, what the coach's perspective, when you already thought you had a team ready to go for next year, you got to go ahead and get a whole nother starting 5 because you just lost everybody. So you got either one or two options. You can either try to dip your hand in the transfer portal, try to pull out people, or you can try to recruit new talent from freshmen and bring them in and get them started. So it makes things interesting. That's been a big topic for the past 2 years, because even last year was crazy, and even it seems like this year is looking to repeat what they did last year, if not do even worse, because so many people end up in the transfer portal. Even a girl that's on Louisville right now, I can't think of her name, but she came from Syracuse. She was in the transfer portal. So people right now they're not, they're looking to win and looking for opportunities to play. They're no longer waiting their time out, waiting 3 years before they want to play, but they are taking the time out. If they're not playing, it's like, all right, I'm out. So it's interesting right now to see how the transfer portal plays effect in just even in sports in general right now.
Well, it puts it back in. It really puts the power into the players' hands at the end of the day. Like if they feel like they're not getting what they need from that school, they can say bump it. It creates that professionalism on the college level as it is in the professional level as well. Because you see players all the time in professional leagues. Need a trade. I gotta get out of here. Like you're not gonna leave me here. I need to go. Like this is not my thing. At the end of the day, that leaves the power at them. It keeps that if they feel like they can win at this other school or play at this other school, then they have every right to do what they can.
Especially now with the NIL, people can carry their brand from one school to another.
Exactly.
Like, I'm out. Like there's no loyalty no more. It's all what's best for me right now.
Exactly. You just made a good point, and that's why I asked that question. You said there doesn't seem to be a level of loyalty, nor does there appear to be a level of commitment or buy-in, because now that student athlete halfway through the season, perhaps they've already decided that, perhaps they've already decided, at least maybe they're thinking, oh, we have the transfer portal, so we're just going to ride this out. And at the end, we're going to put our name in the transfer portal. But certainly that could resonate that they're not fully committed. And maybe they are not going to perform, or they're not performing really at the level they're capable of performing at, because they're not vested in the program. Certainly there's pros and cons to the transfer portal, pros and cons. I mean, if we look at the history of programs and transferring, we all know that NCAA Division I players, when they transfer, they would have had to sit out.
Right.
And I mean, who wants to do that? Who wants to have to experience sitting out and then sitting out 2 years based on the policy and the institution and at what point you transfer? So now you have the transfer portal. You no longer have to sit out. You could just transfer and decide, as you said, Juwan, let me just see. I think it's best.
Right.
It's best for me to transfer and move on. Thank you very much for everything you've done for me and the opportunity you've provided me. But I just think it's best that it's at this time that I explore other opportunities. And certainly there's pros and cons. And as the NCAA continues to evolve and unfold, because if you look at it, the transfer portal has really helped to level the playing field across the board when you think about it. Now we can look at that Jackson State women's basketball game, March Madness against LSU. And we can look at that game, and that game could have went either way.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson State, right? Jackson State and put HBCUs on the national map.
Yep.
With the magnificent play, big ups to Tamika Reed and what she did in that game. Tremendous coaching, but a tremendous team. She had the pieces. It could have went either way, a call one way or the other, a shot, a turnover, and it could have went a different way. But the magnitude and the impact that she had on the game globally for what she did in that game, and for the HBCUs around the country, and for players who were watching that game, thinking about going to an HBCU, it raised the level of standards. It raised the level of play, and it raised the bar. And it said, you know what? The HBCU has arrived. They're here. They're no longer being satisfied with just making it to the NCAA and being the lower seed. Mm-hmm. And playing against the number one seed.
Yeah.
They're no longer saying that's what that game did. We're not going to be satisfied with just making it there. We want to sit at the table and we want to advance. So everyone is going into the portal. The number of teams in March Madness in the NCAA tournament that went to the portal to get players to balance out the level of playing field was tremendous. Tremendous. And like you said, Desmond, Kentucky, think about that. Kentucky wins an SEC championship. They beat South Carolina for the championship. Yeah. They go to the NCAA Kentucky. They play a tremendous program. They come back, and 3 of your starters, we're not talking 3 of your players, 3 of your starters decide they're entering the portal. That's a rebuilding mode there. She's gonna have to go to work and pull that experience back together and do it very quickly to have an impact. Because when you lose 1, or you lose 2, but you lose 3, that's a tremendous change. And we all know in this game, sometimes one player can make the difference.
Yep.
In how that chemistry and how the team plays. We all know that on this call. One player. We can look at the NBA teams, we can look at some of the top college teams. And sometimes one player can make a difference on how that team and how that engine runs.
True that. One thing I do want to ask before we run out of time and make sure we get to our rapid fire was, with the transfer portals you talked about, how should, what type of advice do you have for the athletes and coaches for during this time?
Well, it's interesting during March Madness. And as I mentioned earlier on the show, I'm a retired professor and head women's basketball coach at Miami-Dade College for 35 years. And I've been fortunate to graduate and transfer over 93% of our student athletes and move them on to top NCAA Division I university programs across the country and Division II. And this year alone in March Madness, we have some Miami-Dade former alumni players that were doing big things, starting with Yolette McPhee-McCune, who's at Ole Miss in the ACC, one of the 12 historical Black coaches, women coaches that made it to the NCAA. And Ole Miss put it down. They did big things. Former player. We had two other players, Delia Brown and Alice Markova, who helped Miami-Dade, who helped Liberty University go to the WNIT. We had another Miami-Dade alumni who helped our program, Michelle Pruitt, who helped UMass to the NCAA. And then another one, Nasla Monroe, who went to DePaul University. And so it's all relative to the impact of the game. And coaches, as they continue to move forward in this process, they know the policy. They know the risk. Legislation voted on it. They were at the table when this rule and this legislation passed. It's not something that they didn't talk about just overnight. This is a discussion and conversation, because legislative law and legislative pieces don't just show up and don't just surface overnight. It starts in a boardroom. It starts with conversation. It starts with dialogue at the NCAA convention, in those legislation coaches meetings and conferences, and these issues arise. And maybe 2 years before they brought it up, it wasn't passed. Maybe 2 years before that, there was another conversation. It still didn't pass. And now that same dialogue surfaced again. And here we are 2 years later. And that same legislative piece that there's been a series of discussions about finally passed. So coaches knew going into this process, this new paradigm, this new awakening in women's sports and men's sports and college basketball, what the risks were, what the issues could be, that kids at the end of the year could very well come into their office in their end of the season meeting and say, Coach, it's been a great year. I'm excited, and it's been phenomenal playing for you and playing for the program, and I appreciate everything. But I just feel it's best right now for me that I make a change. And so they know the cost to be the boss. They know when they dribble and they keep crossing over what the outcome could or may not be in this process. So as coaches, they're going to continue to recruit, because if you want to win, you got to recruit. That's the name of the game. You got to put players on the floor that can play this game and score. So they're going to exercise their right now, and they're going to go to the portal just like every other coach. They're also obviously going to continue to recruit and look at top junior college and community college players at the National Junior College Championships, because they got experience too. And obviously they're going to continue to recruit those top high school prospects, the top high school McDonald's All-American high school candidates, because they need players. And their job in many cases may or may not be on the line. We know, Desmond and Juwan, at this time of the year, there's a huge turnover. There's huge coaching openings that are open. Texas Southern, open up St. Louis. We see coaching changes constantly going. We saw Felicia take the job at Syracuse. Felicia Leggett, who left University of Buffalo, and she took the job at Syracuse, but she's a Syracuse All-American. And they welcomed her with open arms. So there's a major coaching shift that's going on also in the middle of March Madness. And that's all a part of the game. It's a part of the game. And just like in business, there's always casualties of war and casualties of what you're doing, right?
That hit me.
As a business entrepreneur, there are casualties when you're going into an investment that has a high risk. There's a casualty to that. You have to know what it is before you go into it. And you have to decide if you want to play the game based on the risk involved, based on the outcome, based on the results. You may come out on top based on the risk, or you may come out on the bottom. But nevertheless, as a business entrepreneur, business-minded, you take a look at your game plan. You make sure you have a good game plan, and you make sure you have a backup to the good game plan. In case the game plan one doesn't work, you have a backup. And in business, as an entrepreneur, you have to have a backup plan. So I think all the coaches would do well and fare to well in this process as they continue to move forward, as they prepare for their new season, and they have the resources that are available to them to have a good team, to have a viable team, that they're able to maintain their team culture that allows them to continue to have not only a winning team, but a winning program.
Amen. She preaching, y'all. She preaching. But look, so we want to make sure that we are respectful of your time. So we're going to go ahead and transition into this rapid fire, try to get you in, get you out. So this is the game within the game segment. So the very first question is, are you ready to play?
You got to be ready to play this game. And it's not just a game on the floor in between those 95 feet. It's the game of life.
I love it.
You have to be ready to be a champion. One of my favorite verses, and there are two favorite verses, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And another is Corinthians 13, love is kind. Love is not rude.
Amen.
Yeah, love is not rude. It's not temperamental. It's grateful. It forgives. And the Lord is your shepherd. And whatever is for you is for you. And it's
Amen.
Nothing against you. And you have to be able to applaud and praise people and your colleagues and your friends when they're doing something great and they're having success. Because it all happens in seasons. It may be your season. And so you have to be grateful. I mean, you look at the game itself and what this game has done to help people experience success, not only on the floor or help them to be better college students, or help them to gain employment.
Yeah.
Because when we play this game, it's not just about the NCAA and winning a national championship. That's the goal. But at the end of the day, the degree and graduating with that degree so that you will be gainfully employed for the rest of your life is the ultimate goal. And, capture the game allows everyone that's playing the game to capture that part of the game and be that champion for life, not just for a day, not just for a week, but for a lifetime. So I'm excited that you've given SusanSummonsSpeaks.com an opportunity to join Capture the Game, you, Densva, and Jawan, and what this platform means to the many people that listen and follow the show. And you've had some amazing people on your show. I'm humbled really to join the stellar, magnificent cast that you've had on this show. I'm humbled to even just be in alignment with the celebrities and legendary historical game changers and game makers that you've had on this show. And, I applaud the both of you in what you're doing, because you're doing a phenomenal job as a host and bringing it. And that's relative. The pandemic has changed and transformed how everyone works and lives and looks at life. And some people in this pandemic, they made a decision maybe to stop and maybe say, well, you know what, I'm going to wait for this thing to pass. I'm going to wait for this pandemic to pass. Then you had another group of individuals who said, I'm not waiting for this pandemic to pass. I'm going to jump out there and I'm going to keep doing my thing. I'm going to continue to push for my goals. I'm going to continue to persevere. And it's going to have to catch up to where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And so you have this new awakening in the globe. The world is awakening. The world is waking up, but they're waking up much different than where they was 2 years ago. And people often ask me, how are you able to continue to stay motivated? What challenges, what strategies, what's your secret? What would you say to people? What advice would you give them? And one thing I would say, and one advice I would say to anyone who's listening, whether it's sports, you're an entrepreneur, you're a woman teaching, a leader, a CEO, a producer, is passion fuels.
Yes, it does.
Goals. And the power of passion is undeniably critical to anyone that is pursuing their goals that are related to success and lifetime of success. And sometimes you don't experience success overnight. And sometimes it may not happen in your time. It happens in his time. Mm. There's no time clock on that. And you have to be able to continue to have perseverance and that determination and that passion that fuels your desire and helps you to maintain being driven and increases that high level of ambition, passion, the power of passion. And then you have to have gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. You have to be grateful with gratitude and humbled. And so those are just some brief points that I would convey on how to. And, again, I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to join you on the show. Anyone can go to Susan Summons' YouTube channel and subscribe. They can go to my SusanSummonsSpeaks.com and follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and capture the game, doing big things. But I encourage everyone across the world, to continue to shine, because the sun is shining on you. Doesn't matter where you're at. Doesn't matter where you're standing. Doesn't matter where you're sitting. It doesn't matter that you just didn't get that job interview. The sun is still shining on you. And when you wake up tomorrow, the sun is going to shine even brighter. Amen. Because of your passion.
Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it.
Wait.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead. Skirt. Pump the brakes.
Since it's March Madness, we can't go out without saying who you got winning on both sides of the spectrum.
Oh, look, I got winning. I've got South Carolina, first of all, headed to the Final Four because they got the $22 million woman in Don Staley. But they have some incredible pieces. They've got Boston in the middle. They got Henderson. They got Cook. They have the lineup. They have depth. They have rotation. They got the shot. They got the swag. They're unfolding at the right time. It doesn't matter how you get it done. Sometimes it's not pretty the way you get it done. But what's important is that you get it done. I'm looking at Stanford. Stanford is a mainstay. Tara Vanderveer and what she's done over the years, the Pac-10, sometimes people forget, but she's always there. She's always in the top 10 in the nation. She's always surfacing in the NCAA. I'm looking at, of course, Texas. I'm hoping Texas has got some tremendous pieces. Louisville is a number one seed. We're looking at some of these number one seeds. Louisville is tough. They've got the pieces. They've got the depth. They're making it happen. But what about, look at NC State. NC State.
They got UConn, though. They got UConn, though. It's going to be a tough one for them.
But they got UConn, and it's a tough one. But I think NC State may pull it off. The number one seeds are the number one seeds. And March Madness, it's been an incredible March Madness for the women. And it's been even more incredible because the women have been a part of March Madness.
Okay.
The commercials, the ESPN, the advertising, the marketing, what they've done to include March Madness and, some of those challenges that women have faced, the inclusion, the diversity, that's changing. It's changing, and it's time that women are able to sit at the table and be recognized and acknowledged. So, continue to be heard, continue to have a voice, continue to lead, and keep making great things happen. March Madness, Final Four, doing big things. Ball in. Get a girl.
That's right. I love that commercial. That's my credit. I'll be dancing when it comes on too, and every time.
Get a girl. Get a girl.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Capturing the Game. Susan is already giving out her socials on how to keep up with her, keep up with everything in her career. Keep up with us as well on all of our social media platforms, whether it be CCG_podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We're on all social media platforms, or whether it's your favorite podcast on your favorite podcast platform, I should say, or Capture the Game Within the Game, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it. We're everywhere. Just go ahead and find us. Susan, it's been a pleasure. And like I said, you deserve all the roses in the world right now. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us and sharing it with the world.
Listen, thank you again so much. I do want to add that I'm sending many prayers up and blessings up for Brittany Griner. And as we know, she's in Russia and she's in the middle of a major war that's going on. But she is a well-decorated WNBA player and Olympian. So many blessings to her and prayers for her return to the U.S.
Amen.